The Princess of Swords from the Oak Tarot of Love and Romance stands as a striking visual contradiction, forcing us to reckon with the idea that emotional honesty often requires a warrior's posture. In Joe Bandel's deck, this isn't just a card about youthful energy or messages. It's a profound study of what happens when a person decides to stop hiding behind pleasantries and start standing in their own truth. We see a woman in bold black and silver surrounded by a defensive circle of 4 smaller swords, while a resilient oak tree looms in the background. It's an image that immediately challenges the traditional soft focus of romance decks, suggesting that real love might actually require a bit of steel.
It really does strip away that hazy sentimentality we usually associate with the suit of cups or traditional romance. Bandel's interpretation of the sword suit focuses on what he calls mental or platonic love, the architecture of a relationship rather than just the feelings. The princess represents the grounded, earthy aspect of air. That sounds like a technical contradiction, but in practice, it's about taking those high-flying intellectual ideals and actually living them out in the messy, physical world. She isn't just thinking about boundaries, she's physically manifesting them with that defensive circle of swords. That fierce, direct gaze she has, it's not meant to be an attack. It's a level of honesty that's meant to be a foundation.
That directness can be jarring, though. If you're used to the strong, silent type or the idea that nice is the same as kind, this card feels like a cold splash of water. Look at the colors, dramatic blacks, sharp silvers, and those bold reds. It's high contrast energy. Bandel often talks in his organic Gnosticism work about the standard of truth, using the oak tree as a symbol of something that stays firm while the light and the leaves are shifting. When we see the princess standing near that tree, it implies her strength isn't just a temporary mood or a defensive reflex. It's rooted in something ancient and structural. But doesn't that defensive circle of 4 swords suggest she's still keeping the world at a distance? It looks a lot like armor.
It's a specific kind of armor, though. In his Oak Matrix Unleashed writings, Bandel suggests that we often see boundaries as a rejection of intimacy, but he argues they're actually a requirement for it. Think of the swords not as weapons for war, but as tools for carving out a space where love can be honest. If she doesn't have those 4 swords forming that circle, she might be swept away by someone else's chaos or her own past trauma. The princess has been through hard things. That's a core part of her backstory in this deck. She's come out the other side stronger. That defensive circle is what allows her to be soft and strong at the same time. She can afford to be emotionally honest because she knows she's safe within her own self-reliance.
I want to push back on that soft and strong duality. It sounds great in a greeting card, but in a relationship, that strong side often looks like defiance. The description mentions a slightly defiant smile and powerful, steady breathing. If I'm on the receiving end of that, it might feel like I'm constantly being audited. In a romantic context, if one partner is always working hard at a task with focused energy, as the card describes, where is the room for the spontaneous, the vulnerable, or even the lazy parts of love? It feels like she's always on, always ready for a confrontation with the truth.
That's the exact tension Bandel wants us to feel. He characterizes the male experience of this card as feeling both challenged and inspired. It's uncomfortable to be seen that clearly. Most of us operate on a certain level of performance or social lubrication. The Princess of Swords doesn't do that. She represents a shift from duality as conflict to duality as a loving embrace. But that embrace requires you to drop your own facade. For a man, encountering this energy, whether in a partner or within himself, often triggers a fear of being managed rather than loved. But the goal here isn't management, it's clarity. If you look at the research into relationship satisfaction, like the studies published in American Psychologist around late 2025, there's a growing emphasis on radical present moment awareness. That's what her steady breathing and fierce eyes represent. She's fully present, which is actually a massive compliment to the partner, even if it's intimidating.
So for the female experience, it's less about being the warrior and more about the courage to finally speak clearly about needs. The card description says it's about a growing sense of your own strength. In many traditional decks, the Page or Princess of Swords is just a messenger, someone who brings news, often bad news. Bandel seems to be elevating her from a messenger to a sovereign. She's not carrying a letter for someone else, she's writing the rules of her own engagement. But isn't there a risk of becoming the Ice Queen archetype that the sword suit is so often accused of? That cold, hyper-analytical person who uses logic as a blunt instrument.
Bandel addresses that by distinguishing between social enforcers and wise protectors. The traditional Queen of Swords is often seen as the widow or the hardened intellectual, but the princess in the Oak Tarot is at an earlier, more fiery stage. She has a fierce yet clear gaze. The fire isn't for burning others, it's for refining her own thoughts. She's focused on a task. That task is often the work of self-discovery. If she comes across as cold, it's usually because she's refusing to participate in a dynamic that isn't honest. The soft part of the soft and strong equation comes from her emotional honesty. She isn't just being logical, she's being truthful about how she feels. In the Oak Matrix philosophy, the most romantic thing you can do is offer someone the truth of their own worth and your own without the distortion of the ego.
Let's talk about that oak tree again. It's such a heavy symbol in this deck. In Celtic and Norse traditions, it's the tree of Thor and Zeus, the thunder gods. It's about endurance. By placing it behind this young woman in her black and silver gear, Bandel is saying her resilience isn't a fluke. It's grounded in reality. This brings up an interesting point about personal growth. Often we think of finding ourselves as this light, airy, follow-your-bliss journey. But the Princess of Swords suggests it's a grueling, focused effort. She's working hard at a task. Is the task the relationship itself, or is the relationship just the laboratory where she does her own work?
It's definitely the laboratory. Bandel's suit of swords is essentially a map of ego deconstruction. The princess is the entry point where you realize that your mind can be a sanctuary rather than a cage. If you're pulling this card, it's often a call to look at where you're being armored instead of clear-hearted. Are you using your words to build a bridge or a wall? The 4 swords around her are a defensive circle, but they are smaller than the one she holds. She is the master of that energy. It reminds me of how historians describe the role of the watchman or the diplomat, someone who has to facilitate sensitive negotiations under difficult conditions. In a relationship, that negotiation is the constant balancing act between 2 different people's truths.
It strikes me that this card is very much about the earthy aspect of air. Air is ideas, communication, and intellect. Earth is manifestation, stability, and the physical body. Combining them gives you practical logic. It's one thing to have a philosophy about love. It's another to hold one sharp sword and say, "This is where I stand." It makes me wonder about the tough resilience mentioned in the meaning. Usually we associate resilience with the ability to bounce back after a blow, but the princess looks like she's not just bouncing back, she's standing her ground so she doesn't get knocked over in the first place.
Exactly. She has integrated her pain and turned it into a boundary system. Bandel notes that the princess has been through hard things, and that's why she doesn't need to be armored in a traditional, heavy way. Her clarity is her primary tool. If you know who you are and what you need, you don't need to shout or fight. You just need to be direct. That slightly defiant smile isn't an invitation to a quarrel. It's the smile of someone who can't be gaslit. She knows her own mind. For someone in a relationship with her, that's either the safest place in the world or the most terrifying, depending on how much they're trying to hide.
That brings up a great point about the duality of the card. It's a call for emotional honesty, but honesty can be destructive. In some interpretations of the Princess of Swords, like those found in the Thoth traditions that Bandel sometimes echoes, this energy is seen as the fixation of the volatile. It's the moment a new idea hits the ground and breaks the old structures. If you're using this card as a guide for romantic dynamics, you have to be prepared for the destruction of the old ways of relating. You can't have this level of self-reliance and still expect to play out old codependent patterns. The princess is effectively the end of the beginning of that old self.
And that's why the oak is so vital. It promises that even if the truth is painful, the foundation, the relationship or the self, is strong enough to weather the storm of that realization. Bandel's work in the Oak Tarot suggests that the embrace was always here. We just have to be brave enough to walk into the clearing and hold the light steady. The princess is that first step of bravery. She's the one who says, "I am here. I am real, and I am not going to minimize myself to make this easier for you. It's a high standard, but it's the only way to reach what he calls the sacred wholeness of the later cards.
It's a powerful shift in perspective, moving from the princess as a mere messenger to a guardian of integrity. It forces us to ask whether we are using our words to create a sanctuary or a cage, and whether we have the courage to be seen for who we truly are, rather than who we want others to see. This card isn't offering false hope or easy answers. It's a practical call to action to ground our highest ideals in the reality of our daily interactions. If you found this deep dive into the resilient spirit of the Princess of Swords helpful, pass this episode along to someone who's working on their own balance of strength and softness.